Good evening, everybody. Buenas noches. It is great to be back in northern Manhattan. It's great to be back with so many people that I've had the chance to work with over the years. Whether it was, and I believe I'm supposed to do a quick opening, whether it was at the Board of Education. I remember working with who is now our senator in bringing in a superintendent who is representative of the community. That was some years ago. Or working as comptroller. One thing, Northern Manhattan helped elect me as comptroller of the city of New York. I will never forget that. I will never forget the support from so many people in this room. And then in an even tougher race in 2009, when I chose to take on the richest person in the city of New York and run for mayor, people in this room, so many people in this room could have taken the easy way out and stayed home and not gotten involved. They didn't. They got involved, all of you, many of you, got involved in that race in 2009 as we fought to move this city in a different direction. And I've always been grateful and always continue to be grateful. And still, I remember our senator and I guess a tough radio ad that you wound up doing back in 2009. I've always appreciated it. Thank you so much. And it is great to be here again with the team of elected officials from Northern Manhattan who realize that as we work together, we are stronger. So it's great to see the senator, it's great to see our new assemblywoman, and it's great to see our councilman working together. I saw you over there, Bob Jackson. Don't worry about that. Bob, you're messing up my opening, Bob. Okay. Tell you what, Bob, if you would have waited, I would have mentioned the next borough president of the borough of Manhattan.
This is my neighborhood, brother.
Yes, it is.
And I'm the vice chair of this foundation here, brother, where you are.
Councilman?
Let me speak the truth.
Councilman, let me ask you a question. In any room that I'm in, for how many years now? If you're in the room, do I always mention you and how do I recognize you? How do I recognize you? As an American hero for standing up and fighting for our children. Always.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Now, a slightly different.
You didn't make it as a mayor last time for a very small margin. And a lot of people are saying that you were out of the loop for, during the 4 years after the elections. What is different now? What can you offer now that was different from last time that may make you a winner this time?
Well, the first thing, number one, over the last 3 years, I haven't been out of the loop. I've been working as, first, you do need a job to support your family. So not being an elected official, I had to do that. That's number one. Number two, I co-chaired Governor Cuomo's campaign in 2010. I was one of 3 co-chairs, myself, Congresswoman Velasquez, and the former state Republican chair. We were the 3 co-chairs of the campaign. I chaired the Battery Park City Authority in Lower Manhattan. I chaired a task force for the governor on judicial compensation, and something I've been involved in then and still now. I chair the MWBE team for the governor as we work to try and get the state of New York to 20% participation with minority and women-owned businesses. So I haven't been in the business in the last 2 years. I'm just not an elected official. What would I do differently this time? And last time I ran, I talked about it. Maybe people, and a number of people didn't listen and some of the message got drowned out. But I talked about a different vision for the city of New York. I talked about a different direction for the city of New York. I talked about a city where middle class and working New Yorkers aren't squeezed out and pushed out each and every day. I talked about an education system in 2009 that I said wasn't working then. And it's clear right now, it really isn't working and serving our children. I talked about growing small businesses in 2009. I'm still talking about growing small businesses and minority and women-owned businesses across the city of New York. So what's changed? I think that I don't have to run against somebody who's going to spend $120 million this time around. That is different. I also don't have to overcome a sense of inevitability that Mike Bloomberg couldn't be beat. We knew in 2009 he could. In 2013, he's not around. And so that sense of inevitability doesn't exist this time around. And last but not least, I think that last time, as I said, that the playing field was a little uneven. I think it's a level playing field, and this time around, having support and community-based support, and not having to deal with the phrase, or deal with, I think the phrase then was paid volunteers, which I've never heard of before in my life, is different this time around. This time, grassroots and people on the ground are going to determine this election. That's what's different this time.
Back to education. As you said, a lot of things are not working. What are the two things that you prioritize to make sure that the education system works for our children?
I think the first thing that we need, we have had almost 12 years of the person who heads our education system not being an educator. That's the first thing. We need an educator as chancellor of the New York City public school system. When we talk about having, if you don't feel well, in all due respect, you don't go to see an auto mechanic to find out what's wrong with you. You go to see a doctor. We have put business people and those who aren't qualified to, in fact, run an education system in charge of it. The first priority is to put an educator in charge of an education system. Second priority would have to be creating a different environment in the city of New York. One that puts forth a strong curriculum, one that lets everyone in this room understand the direction that we want to go in. Right now, I could go around this room, and this is a room of well-informed people, myself included. I can't tell you what direction, what they're attempting to do in our education system right now. And I'm not sure that they can tell us. I think creating goals, definable goals, letting you understand what we're trying to do, the direction we're trying to go in, where we're going with curriculum, what we're trying to do with English language learners, what we're trying to do as far as changing the poor graduation, not even poor graduation rate. What happens because 71% of our children can't do college level work when they graduate right now. It is putting a vision forward, one that everybody is part of, and then moving forward in that direction. So I think that, and you can do that in the first few months. It's a question of who you hire as chancellor, and then the vision, the educational vision that is put forward. Those are the two things I think that need to be done right away.
Would you get rid of charter schools, or would you continue creating charter schools?
I would continue charter schools. I'm not scared of charter schools. However, charter schools and the way charter schools are being done right now is a problem. So what you're doing is letting schools fail in the city, closing them down and giving parts of them to charter schools. There is a problem in doing that. Also, charter schools and the theory behind them was you were supposed to take creative and innovative ideas from charter schools and scale them up into the full public school system. That's not happening right now. So I'm not scared of charter schools, but I'm not going to help. I'm not going to let schools fail to give parts of those buildings to charter schools. And good ideas from charters are, need to be scaled up. Last but not least, the charter schools as opposed to public schools. It's a conversation or a discussion, an argument that really shouldn't be had. We wind up, it is a distraction. Right now, there are probably somewhere between 40 and 50,000 children in charter schools. There are more than 1 million children in the rest of the public school system, and yet we spend our time debating charters or no charters. Let us focus on the more than 1 million children and improve education for all of us.
Mr. Thompson, we keep hearing the same themes with all the Democratic candidates for mayor, more or less. Can you give me 3 specific things that make you a different candidate from the other candidates in the Democratic field?
Number 1, my background, and growing up in New York City, growing up in Brooklyn, growing up in Bedford-Stuyvesant.
That doesn't make you different.
Yeah, it does make me different. It lets me understand some very different things about the city of New York. So yes, it does make me different. Being the grandson of immigrants and growing up in the house with them, that makes me different. My background and experience as a deputy borough president in Brooklyn, a chief of staff to United States congressman, member of the Board of Education, president of the Board of Education, chief financial officer for the city of New York as the Comptroller, candidate for mayor, champion of minority and women-owned businesses. That makes me different than the other candidates who are running also. That is a huge difference. And last but not least, I guess we are different in a number of different ways in positions of education and minority business and so many other things. But I also think it is, while I may not fight with people on a regular basis, it is standing up and fighting for what is right and standing up for what I believe in that I think makes me different than the other candidates also.
How about 3 policies that you would like to implement and make you different from the other candidates? 3 policies, concrete policies.
I've mentioned again minority women-owned business. I would target, the state of New York can target 20% there. I think New York City at the very least can target 20%. That's one specific policy difference. Number 2, I don't think that there's anyone else who has indicated that as far as the chancellor, and that is a place I'm not going to change my mind. No matter how talented a person, we need an educator at the top of our system. I've been very firm in that. I don't believe that others are there also. And then policy, I'm probably the only person who has talked about adding police officers right now. We need additional cops. I've talked about making sure that we change stop and frisk and make sure that we get that right. But adding police officers and having 1,000 of those officers go to the 5 highest crime districts or precincts in the city of New York and tying that in to the social services in the neighborhood also to bring crime down and keep it down in the 5 toughest neighborhoods in New York City. Those are 3 specific areas that make me different than the other candidates.
And in your opinion, who's been the best mayor of the city of New York in the last 30 years? I'm trying.
We did this. Didn't we do this on TV?
Can you give me one name?
Didn't we do this on TV?
Yeah, but I didn't get an answer. Can I get it now?
No, because what I said then, what I said to you off camera, what I say to the public right now is there are parts of different mayors who have done things that you want to take pieces of and copy. Ed Koch's spirit, but also Ed Koch's focus on affordable housing in the city of New York, unlike any other mayor that in this city's history. That's number 1. David Vinkin's focus on children when he was the mayor of the city of New York. Giuliani's focus on bringing crime down and trying, and for the first time, letting us understand, yes, you could bring crime down. And Mike Bloomberg, as a manager, is being able to make sure that the city runs. All of those things are things that you want to make sure that you take parts of. So there isn't one mayor that you want to copy. If there was, I'd be happy to tell you that, but it's kind of the combination of different mayors.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Thompson, we're in the middle of a bus strike. Northern Manhattan special ed teacher, Beth Brady, has 12 students in her class, most of which use wheelchairs. And since this strike has started, only one of them has been able to make it in. This is an issue that's affecting our community, and some argue affecting it with a double impact, if you will, because some claim that there's an education crisis, and this particular situation is one that's complicated and compounded the plight of many working class and immigrant families who struggle daily. What would you do if you were in a position now to deal with this strike? And for that matter, what would you have done perhaps to avert it if you believe it should have been?
Well, if I would have been the mayor, there would not have been a bus strike. I think we want to bring costs down and make sure that we get, the most out of every dollar. But the employee protection provision should have been included in a contract. It is an issue. Some would say, oh, you want to offer job protection. No, I want to offer safety protection to our children. I think having bus drivers and those on the buses who both know our children and have driven them for extended periods of time, I want the person behind the wheel to be a safe driver. I don't want on-the-job training. I don't want to run the risk of having a bad driver behind the wheel and us finding out about it because there was an accident that hurt one of our children. So to begin with, there would have been, I would have included an employee protection provision in the contracts. We wouldn't have had a strike. There are other ways to try and drive costs down, working hard on routes and making sure that you get the most out of that. However, not changing those routes in the middle of the winter, as we saw what happened when that occurred. But getting and being smarter about what we're doing. What we're seeing these days is a mayor who doesn't want to discuss, who believes it is his way or the highway. And what we're looking at is a school bus strike right now. We're looking at least $250 million that the city of New York has lost in education because the mayor couldn't come to an agreement on an evaluation process for teachers. There's something wrong there. So it isn't a question of what would I have done if I was mayor. There would not have been a strike.
And now that we're in one, what would you do?
Pull the contracts back, rebid the contract with the employee protection provision, and move on from there.
Republican candidate Joe Lota recently said that going Democrat, if you will, would be going back. You, in fact, were the last Democratic candidate, and a conversation that has been had is that we have been under Republican, the rule of a Republican administration for a number of years. Some children don't know what it's like to have a Democratic mayor.
They will this time around.
How would you make the case to voters, in fact, who perhaps one would argue have been lulled into, despite the fact that 6-1 Democrats are registered as such, have become accustomed to Republicans? What would you say to that?
You know, there isn't a Democratic way or Republican way to run a city. Management isn't Democrat or Republican. It is about qualification, it is about vision, and it's about leadership. That's exactly what it is. So all of these veiled hints, all of this, you know, and let's be honest, you know, Rudy Giuliani, every time he gets near a campaign, he pulls this out. He did it in 2009 when he came in to endorse Mike Bloomberg and talked about, you know, going back to the bad old days or New York City becoming like Detroit. Those are scare tactics. We are past that. We are bigger than that. We are smarter than that. So all of these veiled hints that if you put a Democrat in City Hall, the city's going to fall apart. If you put a Democrat in City Hall, they're going to give it away to the unions. If they put a Democrat in City Hall, crime's going to run rampant. That's not true. It's a scare tactic. It's not accurate. And to be blunt about it, Democrat or Republican, the one thing that the people of the city of New York understand how to do is to walk in and vote for the best person. So, you know, I think that right now, it isn't a question of Democrat or Republican. I believe that the next mayor is going to be a Democrat, but I think it really is a question of qualification and vision. So, it's the old, don't believe the hype. Simple as that.
Fair enough. Just quickly, we've asked this of other candidates. Anything that Mayor Bloomberg, in fact, has done that you would applaud?
You know, I'm going to start in one place. If you go back, Rudy Giuliani left as mayor. And the one thing, the city was polarized. Let's be honest. The city was divided. And Mike Bloomberg, and you got to give him credit for it, when he came in as mayor, he refused to play the politics of old. He refused to play the politics of division. Now, there are other problems, and I can say that the mayor doesn't understand middle-class and working New Yorkers and poor New Yorkers, but at the same point, he's never helped to divide the city along racial or ethnic lines. And I think that, you know, following Rudy Giuliani, this city could not have stood that again. And I think that that is one place that, you know, if you want to look at, he did well. Mayoral control, you may not agree with mayoral control of the education system. That was something else, another accomplishment. And at the very least, talking about and trying, at least in the first few years, to implement reform. I think it has fallen way short. But at the same point, the effort was there.
So we're going to move on to some questions from the audience. Do you think that standardized testing should be a staple of the education system? How is it helpful?
I think that standardized testing should be a part of the education system. But let's be honest, what has happened in our public schools become little test prep factories. They've been teaching to the test, and the teachers have complained, administrators and principals are resentful. They don't have the opportunity to teach. They've been forced to teach children to take standardized tests. And scores, we watched them in 2005 and 6 and 7, those scores went up. When they changed the test, when they renormed it, when the answers weren't the same as the year before, scores fell off dramatically. Focus should have been on comprehension and critical thinking. We should have been teaching young people not to memorize 1 + 1 is 2, but the theories behind it. So when you change the questions, they know the theories and they're able to produce and they're able to do well. That hasn't occurred. So standardized testing is part of evaluation, but it should not be the only part, and it should only be a piece of evaluation. Portfolio, so many other things as we look at. Teacher evaluation, how's the child doing? And then in the end, let's be honest, when young people graduate high school, the bottom line is, can they either go to college, or do they have the skills to go off to the world of work and be able to take care of themselves and have a productive job? And right now, that's not occurring. So if one thing has occurred in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we should have learned that focusing just on standardized testing is a mistake. We need to focus on real education for our children, and then they will do better.
And one last question from the audience. What do you feel can actually be done about gun control in this city and more violent neighborhoods throughout the city?
Well, as I said, I think that first, a lot of gun control, unfortunately, I will come to the city part, is guns coming into New York City from so many other places, which is why legislation that our president is pushing right now needs to happen. We need to, in fact, get guns, and particularly, assault weapons and others, out of the hands of individuals. But New York City's problem is more handguns than it is in assault weapons. I think that some of it is, stop and frisk doesn't take guns off the streets the way it's supposed to, but at the same point, you don't want to eliminate stop and frisk. You want to make sure it's used correctly. That's number one. Number two, if communities felt closer to the police department, and unfortunately that gap continues to grow, people would feel more comfortable in picking the phone up or in speaking to an officer. Part of that is back to community policing. Speaking to the officer in the neighborhood to let people know who has the guns. Who has the guns, and you can target it there also. But if we don't, in fact, and if you look at some of the, and I'm sure you will hear the word Cincinnati used, if you don't start to look at the educational models in other places where they create whole communities out of schools and get young people off the streets and away from violence and keep them from becoming engaged in violence and away from guns, that's another way to do that. Last but not least, and I talked about adding police officers on the streets and having and tying in, though, to social services in those neighborhoods, tying them closer together to be able to reduce, not just reduce crime, but keep crime down. All of those things together help to get guns off the street, and particularly in the 5 highest crime neighborhoods, that drives crime down. That gets guns off the street. That creates safer environments for young people and for everyone in the community. That's ways that you can help to get guns off the streets.
Can you expand a little bit on that? This is the second time you've mentioned tying together policing work with social services in these high crime neighborhoods. Well, what do you have in mind?
It is tying in, bringing additional police officers in. And in many of our communities, we have social services on the private and public side, nonprofits and other types of organizations. They don't work together. We don't tie them together. We don't create the synergies between them to make them work. We need to do that. We need to tie them together and tie those community organizations together in better ways, and they provide more coordinated services. and we can be able to bring them in more central locations also within communities. I believe one of the things and the mistakes I've seen in the last 2 years, community-based organizations, we've seen them taken out little by little by little out of communities, located in central downtown areas, and the residents of the communities don't have those services to fall back on, or they're not working with people who know the communities best. We need to do that and do that better.
We have another question from the audience. Do you believe that arts contribute to social change and community development? If so, how would you support equitable support of arts in communities of color?
One of the things that, and this is one of those admission moments, when I was in junior high school and high school, in New York City Public Schools, I played the viola, all right? It was a good experience in a lot of ways for me. It taught discipline, it taught so many different things. Over the years, we've watched art and music education come out of the schools. If you look at when I was at the Board of Education as its president, working with a focused chancellor like Rudy Crew, we put arts and music education back in the school system. And we did it over a 3-year period of time, and we did it on a community-based level. So principals in schools could reach out to local communities and bring in dance from the local communities, music from the local communities, art from the local communities. People were part of the school. It made sense. The Bloomberg administration has taken art and music out. What they said to principals is, you can have art and music education in your school, here's the money, but we suggest you use it for test prep, because if the school doesn't do well, you're going to lose your job. So principals turn around, take the money for art and music education, and spend it on test prep and other things, because they don't want to lose their jobs. Art and music education should be a part of our public schools. It helps to keep some young people. There are so many young people, so many of our children, who are very talented. Art and music education is a way for them to show that talent. It's a way to keep them interested in other things. It's a way to make sure that they come to school even when they're sitting there going, I'm not good at math. I'm not good in science. But if I come to school, I get to be involved in art and music. That brings them back. That gets them to focus in math. That gets them to focus in other areas. And in the end, we wind up being and having better and more well-rounded students. One of the things that I'm astonished by, we have some of the greatest cultural institutions in the world that are in New York, and our young people have no idea that they're there. And we go out of, and we don't make sure that they get to see the museums and art museums and so many other things in the city of New York. We just don't provide that opportunity for them. It can be done. I was part of it. I saw it done before. It needs to be done again.
Mr. Thompson, a lot of people are shocked that the Democratic Party doesn't have a Latino candidate for mayor this year. Why do you think is that? Do you think it's the party is to blame, or do you think there's not a good candidate to run for mayor in the Democratic Party?
Let's see. The second part of that is, I wouldn't. Look, I think there are a number of good candidates who are out there. And while you might not have a Latino candidate for mayor in 2013, you probably will in 2017 or 2021. There are a number of very qualified people out there who are Latino, and whether they are in other elective offices right now and have chosen not to run, or they will run in the future, there will be a Latino mayor in the city of New York, all right? It won't be in 2013, but it will in the future. It will be in the future. So it's, you know, as far as why there, and it's not a question of the Democratic Party, because the one thing that all of us understand, the party may be there, but you have to do it yourself. You have to do it with yourself and people around you and with communities. So why isn't there? I can't answer that question. Will there be? Absolutely there will be. Absolutely.
When we wait for the other candidates to come, can you tell me, you talked a lot about affordable housing and about the legacy of Mayor Eckhart in this issue. Would you impose any kind of rent control, new rent control regulations in the city or rent stabilization?
You're not going to get new rent control in the city of New York, because right now the one thing about it, and it still is something that I find incredibly irritating, Albany controls our destiny. You know, we don't have control of New York City's housing laws here in the city of New York, and that's not going to change. You know, I don't see that changing.
You wouldn't go to Albany and try to change it?
Oh, I'd love to try and change it. I would love to get control of our city. At the same point, the one thing that we have to do, and it is to create a focus, as we have done before. Late 50s, 1960s, we had a housing shortage. We created a Mitchell-Lama program that created affordable housing, moderate and middle-income housing across the city of New York. We need to work on preservation, making sure that we maintain those apartments that are stabilized and controlled right now. But we also, if we're going to make sure that we have a city that we're all going to be able to stay in, and that we're going to be able to bring families up, and our families are going to be able to stay here. If we don't build new housing, and a lot of that will involve tax breaks and other things, it will involve investing, like I did when I was comptroller, in affordable housing, and putting hundreds of millions of dollars in pension funds in affordable housing. It will require us working together on a focused basis and using a number of programs. But just to talk about maintenance and keeping what we have, we are falling behind each and every day. We have to build new housing. You look at this neighborhood. People are being squeezed out each and every day. We need to build new housing. It's as simple as that.
I want to go back to the question about why a Democratic candidate has not won the mayoralty in the past, I don't want to say in many years. Why do you think that has been? We haven't had any strong enough candidate, or what is it, according to you?
I think that, not just money. I think that if you look at where Republican mayors have been elected in the city of New York, there were defining events that changed things. I don't know that, and I will talk just for briefly, 2001. I believe if we weren't attacked on September 11th, if we weren't attacked, then Freddie Ferrer would have been the mayor of the city of New York. He was trending, everyone was moving in a direction, he would have gotten 40%.
But there were more chances out for that, and still didn't happen.
But there were chances. 2001 was events helped to change and define things. 2005, at that point, it's an incumbent. You haven't, you know, it's difficult for incumbents to lose. So I think that a lot of things have been changed by events that have occurred, as opposed to weakness, you know, in the Democratic Party. If you look around, mayor may be one thing, but we have an overwhelming number of Democrats in the city council, in the state assembly, in the state senate, in Congress, on the state level and statewide. I think that there have been defining events that have changed that.
Mr. Thompson, I'm wondering what you would say to young folks who feel that this process is altogether not for them. Politics, elections, all the rest. We've got a number of disconnected youth here in Washington Heights and Inwood, and this might be an opportunity for you to speak to them directly since they're eligible to vote.
What I would say to our young people, to our disconnected youth, to so many who have decided that there's nothing in this for them. There's everything in this for them. When we look at the high unemployment rate for our young people and the opportunities that they do not have, when you look at a dropout rate or a school system that is not preparing them for the future, when you look at the fact that they can't afford to live in the city of New York because they can't afford an apartment, no education, no job, no housing, no home. And what I would say to so many of our young people is a lot of the opportunity to change this rests with them, rests with their involvement. You know, I'm maybe a little older, but a child of, I remember the Vietnam War. And I remember well because right around that time I was draft eligible. But we protested. Younger people protested against the war. And if you go back and look at history, that helped to change the direction of this country. Involvement of young people in shaping the future. I would say to our young people right now who have been told through in so many different ways that this city isn't for them. This is their city. This is their city. Be involved, get involved, and help to change the direction and the course of this city.
With that, thank you so much, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you all again. Pleasure being back.